Mr. Hammerstein, you've been about as successful as anyone can be in your profession. Now, in your play Allegro, you made quite a case against success, that it's not all that one might expect it to be. Does it have a high price tag?
Well, yes, I don't think it'd be accurate to say I have anything against success in itself, but there are certain things that go along with it that have a tendency to drag a man away from doing the very things that made him successful. In the case of Allegro, it's a doctor who became successful helping patients. And then he was drawn away into a practice that took up, demanded that he play golf with a great many people, go to cocktail parties, accept appointments on hospital boards, and doing a number of things that took away from him the time he needed to exercise his calling. And that isn't just true of doctors, it's true of lawyers, it's true of librettists, too. I find right now that I'm called away to sit on boards and committees that seem all right in themselves, and they are, otherwise I wouldn't sit on them. But I'm pulled apart and spread pretty thin because I'm successful, and it requires a great effort to throw aside everything and tell everyone I'm working on a play, at which time they stop, they leave me alone. But this sounds as if I'm a very weak character, but everyone's a weak character when it comes to this temptation. Once a man has done well at something, there is a conspiracy in which he takes part to pull him away from that thing. It's something like a runner who runs very fast and wins a lot of races, and then they pin so many medals on him that when he carries those heavy medals, he can't run so fast anymore.
Mr. Hammerstein, you have a reputation in this business for being a most painstaking lyricist, sort of carving words and phrases as if you were a sculptor. Now, have you always been as careful as you appear to be today?
No, I was not. In my younger days, I'm afraid I was at the time sloppy. I wrote a great many songs and shows. Sometimes I'd collaborate on 3 shows in one season. And I would write on trains and walking on the street and sort of prided myself on the speed with which I wrote. And when you write fast, you don't write very well. And I think nowadays when I struggle and sweat and take much longer over a song, I think I do better work. I had some rather severe lessons which improved my work. I can remember one experience in England. I had written the opening chorus of a very successful play here, The Desert Song. And since I knew it was going to be sung very loud with a very loud orchestra, I didn't pay much attention to the words. I knew that the audience wouldn't either. And I wrote words about these were riffs up in a mountain fastness, hiding away, and so I had them singing, "When we are drinking, merrily drinking, who would be thinking who we are," and so forth. It didn't really make very much sense, but it made sound. And that didn't bother me until we went to England and did the show there. And I hadn't reckoned with the superior enunciation of the British chorus. And so when I stood in the back of the theater, Drury Lane, and heard them in very distinct and clipped consonants singing, "When we are drinking, merrily drinking, who shall be thinking who we are," I bowed my head in shame and ran out of the theater and thought I would never take that chance again. I have a feeling that artists who are not artists, who are careless with their work, someday or other must pay for it. And I have a story that is the reverse of that, which shows how it paid off to be very careful and truly artistic and honest. I saw a picture in the New York Tribune, I think, some years ago, and it was taken from a helicopter. And it was taken over the top of the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. And you could see the back of her head, and her hair was sculpted beautifully, and the wave of her hair was quite wonderful, and all of it carefully done. Now, at the time that statue was erected, there was no one who could foresee that a helicopter would someday fly over and see the top of her head. Seagulls might, and that would be all. And nevertheless, the artist in the first instance and the workman who put up his statue did it as if it could be seen by everyone, as eventually it surely was. I think it's much safer to do the whole job very carefully and not think that you'll get away with it and not be caught at careless work.
Someday you might be found out.
Someday you might be found out. A helicopter will be invented to catch you.
I think the average person thinks that authors, poets, lyricists, composers are inspired in their work, that they work only on inspiration. They're suffused with bright flashes and hot flushes of inspiration. Now, all creative people are quick to deny this, but tell me, is there anything at all to this inspiration business?
Well, no, not if you mean your question in the sense of what you call the quick flashes. I don't think that ever comes out of a clear sky with a message that makes you rush to a desk and write down feverishly what has just come to you. I think ideas come to you because you're looking very hard for them and you're at work. And in one sense, however, I think that you can justify the word inspiration. I think that things stay in your mind, things that you saw or heard or felt years ago. And when you're writing and calling on all that is you, all that's part of you, your life, your experiences, your reaction to life, something that happened to you some time ago, someone you knew, comes back into your mind and inspires you to write perhaps a truer version of whatever story you're working on. But what annoys me, and I think most writers, is the feeling that scenery or the sight of a beautiful girl or a moon on the water will make you write. As a matter of fact, these things are very likely not to stand in the way of your writing, because they're so beautiful in themselves that they're better than anything you can write. Last year, I started to write The Sound of Music at Jamaica. We have a little cottage there in Montego Bay. And the way I got work done was to get up in the morning and start as usual at 9 o'clock. But before I started, I closed all the doors so that I couldn't look out over that turquoise blue sea. If I could have, I couldn't have written at all. But so often people say, with a view like this, you ought to be able to write beautifully. They say this on the porch of my farm, and I always try to tell them that the thing to do is to shut out a view if you want to go to work.
You give the impression of being a rather gentle and philosophic kind of man, and so much of your work has this gentle philosophy in it. Is it true to say that the lyrics you write really express your own feelings?
Yes, I think it's true of any honest writer that the things he writes expresses his own feelings, even though he's often writing words for characters who are not like him at all. But somehow or other, I think you come out in the thing that you're writing. When I was young, I didn't believe this. I thought that musical comedies were one thing and just things designed for entertainment. And it was my ambition, when I got older, to stop writing musical plays and really express myself, or maybe I was right, myself, my various selves, in straight plays. Then, as I became more expert in my own field, I realized that if I had something to say, I should say it in the field that I understood the most. And I have found that great satisfaction, I think, in being able to say some things that I really felt as I worked on musical plays.
Well, Mr. Hammerstein, you've worked with a number of composers during your long career, but aside from Mr. Rogers, Jerome Kern and Sigmund Romberg are the two I'd most like to ask you about, as men as well as being composers.
Well, they were both very interesting men. Jerome Kern would have been 75 years old yesterday. He's now dead 15 years. And it's very hard for me to realize that he's been gone that long time, because he's still very much part of my life. If I hear a joke, I have an impulse to want to tell it to him, because he was so fond of jokes and stories, and he used to tell me every good one that he heard. Jerry was a very alert man and knew much more than his music. He had a fund of information about nearly every subject. He was entertaining to be with, and rather insisted on being entertained. He couldn't stand a dull day, and he was always hopping around creating an interest for himself. This is quite unlike his songs. His songs are simple. A simple, straight melody line is what features his work, and yet he was a very complex man, and his life was complex. His days were complex. I had a great affection for him, and he taught me a great deal, as all my collaborators have. One has taught me one thing and one another. Jerry was a very, very painstaking man, and he taught me to pay a great deal of attention to detail, even though the audience might not be completely conscious of the little detail you'd put in. An accumulation of details would make them feel comfortable and feel that the thing was really going on in front of them. Romberg taught me to work hard. He used to stand over me practically with a whip. He would get me up in his apartment on Broadway, and if I handed him a lyrical setting to his music, he would go over it quickly and say, "Yes, that fits, now here's another one," and get me into another room and get me started on another song.
Did he greet all of your lyrics with "it fits"?
Yes, "it fits" was the most extravagant praise I ever received from him, and he meant that as great praise because that's what he was looking for, words that fit his melodies. He always wrote the melodies first.
Mr. Hammerstein, can you account for the popularity of one song and the relative failure of another, which might be actually on the same grounds of merit?
Well, one can try. Of course, it's always theoretical, and it's always hindsight. But there are interesting observations one can make after a song has succeeded or failed. There's one song I would like to discuss in this connection, and that's a song from Carousel called "What's the Use of Wonderin'?" It's a song I like very much, and it has its loyal adherents, and yet I wouldn't say that it was a terribly popular song. It wasn't sung outside the show very often on the air. There was no big selling record of "What's the Use of Wonderin'?" And I have a theory of why perhaps it didn't succeed commercially, where it seemed to do so well within the play. And it may be the very last word in the refrain. The very last word is talk, T-A-L-K. He's your fella and you love him and all the rest is talk. Now that is exactly what I wanted the character to say. That's just what she would say, and I liked the line, and I still like it. But from a technical standpoint, that is not an applause-getting line because of the last word. Talk, the K cuts off the word very sharply and shortly. So you can't sing it. You can't sing it out for applause. If I'd said you're his girl and he's your fellow, that's all you need to know. The open vowel of O would let the singer lean on it and hold on to it and sell it. At the time I wrote the song, I was perfectly conscious of this risk. But if you know a good deal about the technique of songs, one of the pleasures in working is to break the rules every once in a while, see if you can get away with it. I broke this rule, and I think I did not get away with it.
Now, the title song from Allegro contains what I imagine are your feelings about this modern world of ours, and I wonder if you would recite those lines for us.
Our world is for the forceful and not for sentimental folk, but brilliant and resourceful and paranoiac, gentle folk, not soft and sentimental folk. Allegro, a musician would so describe the speed of it, the clash and competition of counterpoint. The need of it, we cannot prove the need of it. We know no other way of living out a day. Our music must be galloping and gay. We muffle all the undertones, the minor blood and thunder tones, the overtones are all we care to play. Hysterically frantic, we are stubbornly romantic and doggedly determined to be gay. Brisk, lively, merry, and bright, Allegro. Same tempo, morning and night, Allegro. Don't stop whatever you do something dizzy and new. Keep up the hullabaloo, Allegro, Allegro, Allegro.
I understand that most composers are continually approached by would-be songwriters for advice, and I suppose you get your share of this burden.
Yes, I do, and I'm always amazed at some of the things I read in these letters because I'm told by amateur songwriters that they can write a song a day, and it would be so nice if they only wrote one song a year and it was a good one. But I find a peculiar thing about the amateur. The amateur is money-mad. He wants to write a song, and he wants it to sell 1 million copies right away, and this is what he's interested in. He doesn't seem to have the same love for a song that a professional has. This is rather paradoxical, but my point is that if you really want to be successful, if you want to make a lot of money at anything, I think you have to love the thing you're doing. And most of the professional songwriters that I know who are successful really love songs. They love the whole idea of a song, and they love not only their own songs but other people's songs. They are in love with the whole project of writing songs. The young man who's just beginning seems to reflect a desire to make a lot of money, and he seems to assume that the people who are making money at it are mainly interested in that. Of course they are interested in it, but that comes later. The most important ingredient of a good song is sincerity. The song has to be your own. You've got to believe every word of it, even though it may be unbelievable to other people. Even though other people may think it's a cheap song, you have to think it's a great song, otherwise you can't start it and finish it and make anything out of it at all. A song is, I think, perhaps the most difficult form of writing, because you have to be terribly simple in your idea and very clear every minute. No one gets a chance to stop and read over a line. He's listening, and the singer is singing to him, and every line has to lead logically into the next line. I think it's a very severe and rigid form, but a fascinating one to work on. The basic rules, of course, of anything usually seem simpler than they are. For instance, the golf instructor says, keep your eye on the ball, and you say, oh, sure, I'll do that. What else do I have to do? But the longer you play, the more you realize how difficult it is just to keep your eye on the ball. If you do nothing else but keep your eye on the ball, you've got a pretty good chance of hitting it. But the beginner is more interested in what kind of stockings he wears on the golf course and how he looks and the jaunty way he walks up to a tee. The real professional has his mind on the simple job of the ball he has to hit. This tendency to skip over the fundamental things and grasp the superficial is the tragedy of man's history from the beginning of time. The songs that have achieved permanent popularity all have something fundamental to say. There are a great many songs you hear on the air that are popular for 3 months and then you never hear them again. But those that you hear year after year, and you've been hearing all your life, if you analyze them, beneath their simplicity, you'll find some truth about life. You take a song, one of my favorite songs is Love's Old Sweet Song, just a song at twilight when the lights are low. This is a terribly simple song, and it's one completely devoted to a mood. And every time I hear it, I can picture myself in the twilight with someone else, watching the sun go down, and all of us have had this experience, and all of us know it's a beautiful experience. This song captures it for us, and so it becomes the official song of twilight for year after year. This, I think, is a very important thing.
Now, you've been quoted as saying that to write a successful and popular song, you must find a new way of saying, I love you.
Well, that's what all songwriters have been doing for the last several thousand years, and I think they'll continue to do it. Just as you think that it's been said in every possible way, someone else or you yourself find another way of saying it. But that's one of our problems. You sit down and you're writing a new show, and you have two characters who love each other, and their problem is, how will they say this in a way that the audience won't think stale?
You said it in a great many refreshing ways, even the titles of these songs. All the things you are, can I forget you, I've told every little star, wanting you, younger than springtime are you, one day when we were young. And then two from Schubert, why do I love you, and the simplest statement of all, you I love. And then in The Sound of Music you find yet another new way with the lyric which begins, I think, a bell is not a bell till you ring it.
Oh yes, well that's the verse to a song, and I'm very fond of that. Could I recite it?
Please.
A bell is no bell till you ring it. A song is no song till you sing it. And love in your heart wasn't put there to stay. Love isn't love till you give it away.
Mr. Hammerstein, you have an uncanny ability to give the female characters in your plays lyrics which express how women feel about love. And What's the Use of Wondering is a good example. But the most touching one that comes to my mind is a song in The King and I, when Lady Thiang explains to Anna just what kind of a man the king really is. And the song is Something Wonderful.
This is a man who thinks with his heart. His heart is not always wise. This is a man who stumbles and falls, but this is a man who tries. This is a man you'll forgive and help and protect as long as you live. He will not always say what you would have him say, but now and then he'll say something wonderful. The thoughtless things he'll do will hurt and worry you. Then all at once he'll do something wonderful. He has 1,000 dreams that won't come true. You know that he believes in them, and that's enough for you. You'll always go along, defend him when he's wrong, and tell him when he's strong, he is wonderful. He'll always need your love, and so he'll get your love. A man who needs your love can be wonderful.
There's been much talk and criticism of putting messages into plays and motion pictures, but you don't seem to object to this, and you don't pull any punches, as in South Pacific with the song, You've Got to Be Taught.
No, well, of course, You've Got to Be Taught is part and parcel of the story and the theme, and I don't think South Pacific would be complete without this comment. I've heard people tell me that they thought this was out of place in a musical play, but that comment usually comes from people who aren't so worried about that kind of a song in a musical play. They're really worried about the theme. They really don't agree with it. They really would not like to have it said.
You say it very simply and in words which have no doubt about them at all.
Yes. You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught.
Mr. Hammerstein, in your career, collaboration seems to be the kingpin, and I assume that this is the most important ingredient of the theater.
Yes, I think it is. I think that anyone who doesn't want to be a collaborator had better write a novel and stay away from the theater. But you can't dodge collaboration in the theater. It's not just a matter of an author collaborating with another author or with a composer, but there is a total collaboration in every play, the convergence and coordination of many different talents: producing, writing, directing, choreography, acting, scene designing, costume designing, lighting, orchestration, theater management, company management, public relations. The mixture of all these ingredients is essential to every theatrical meal that seeks to make itself palatable to the public. To get along in the theater, you must enjoy working side by side with other people, or at any rate, you must be able to tolerate it, because there is no way to dodge it.
I don't think we have to dwell upon your love of the theater. This is so obvious. And in your play, Me and Juliet, which is a treatise on backstage theater, you have a song which expresses how the people in your profession feel about it.
Yes, it's how we feel about an audience, which really is the most fascinating part of the theater and the most unpredictable. The song goes like this. The water in a river is changed every day as it flows from the hills to the sea. But to people on the shore, the river is the same, or at least it appears to be. The audience in a theater is changed every night as a show runs along on its way. But to people on the stage, the audience looks the same every night, every matinee. A big black giant who looks and listens with thousands of eyes and ears. A big black mass of love and pity and troubles and hopes and fears. And every night the mixture's different, although it may look the same. To feel his way with every mixture is part of the actor's game. One night it's a laughing giant, another night a weeping giant. One night it's a coughing giant, another night a sleeping giant. Every night you fight the giant, and maybe if you win, you send him out a nicer giant than he was when he came in. But if he doesn't like you, then all you can do is to pack up your makeup and go. For an actor in a flop, there isn't any choice but to look for another show. The big black giant who looks and listens with thousands of eyes and ears. The big black mass of love and pity and troubles and hopes and fears will sit out there and rule your life for all your living years.
And in Carousel, during the song If I Loved You, the hero, Billy Bigelow, explains, on a night like this, I start to wonder what life is all about. Well, Mr. Hammerstein, you're obviously a man who's thought much on that subject. Now, have you reached any conclusions?
No, I don't think a man who gets as old as I have become can say he's reached any conclusions, because he becomes more and more puzzled and more fascinated by the mystery of life as he goes on living. My own feelings about life are toward the optimistic and hopeful side. And I don't know whether a man works out a philosophy or whether his philosophy emanates from his nature. But whether that's true or not, I think it's terribly important that some people like me must exist to keep affirming the beauties of life, to offset others, even more eloquent perhaps, who are decrying life and scoffing at it and telling you what's wrong with it. Surely there are things that are wrong, but then we must also admit that there are things that are right and beautiful and make it wonderful to be on earth. And this, if it isn't my mission, is at least one of my chief aims. There are certain significant things in some of the songs I've written that indicate my views of life, perhaps more eloquently than my own stumbling efforts to describe my views. At the end of Happy Talk in South Pacific, Bloody Mary says, you've got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how are you going to have a dream come true? I think this is a good reductio ad absurdum. Obviously, you can't ever have a dream come true unless you have a dream to begin with. And people who deny themselves the privilege of dreaming are bound to failure, doomed to failure. The dreamer, too, may fail, but he has a little chance of success, a little chance of a dream coming true once in a while. Other songs that I've written, like You'll Never Walk Alone, which assert that courage is necessary, courage in adversity, are things that I believe very deeply, very genuinely. In The Sound of Music, climb every mountain is another instance of what I believe, that you should devote your life to finding out what you want to do in life, and then when you find it, live that dream that you find, and look everywhere until you find it. I think that I think that today perhaps we lack this positive approach. That there are a great many songs and articles and novels, stories coming out of America that are on the sick side and neglect the great health and hope which has always been our real characteristics and the characteristics that have made us a great country. If we neglect these, we will soon slide back into being far inferior to what we have been. In other words, the world is quite a wonderful place. It's not perfect, but as I say in the Flower Drum song, 100 million miracles are happening every day. And those who say they don't agree are those who do not hear or see. 100 million miracles are happening.